I've argued that the dominant theory of human nature in modern intellectual life comprises the doctrines of the blank slate, the noble savage, and the ghost in the machine. That these doctrines are being challenged by the modern sciences of mind, brain, genes, and evolution. That these challenges are also seen to threaten fundamental moral values, but in fact, that doesn't follow. On the contrary, I think a better understanding of what makes people tick can clarify those values by showing that political equality does not require sameness, but policies that treat people as individuals with rights. That moral progress does not require that the mind is free of selfish motives, only that it has other motives to counteract them. Responsibility does not require that behavior is uncaused, only that it responds to contingencies of credit and blame. And meaning in life does not require that the process that shaped the brain have a purpose, only that the brain itself have a purpose. Moreover, I think that grounding values in a blank slate is a mistake. It's a mistake because it makes important values hostages to fortune, implying that someday empirical discoveries could make them obsolete. And it's a mistake because it conceals the downsides of denying human nature, such as persecution of the successful, totalitarian social engineering, an exaggeration of the effects of the environment, such as in parenting and the criminal justice system, a mystification of the bases of responsibility, democracy, and morality, and the devaluing of human life on Earth. Thank you very much. And are there any questions? There are 2 microphones in the aisles, and it'll be a good idea to come up to the microphone so that other people can hear the question. Yes, Phil.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Pinker. This was as fun as the 2,900 lectures that I sat through. For all just as invigorating.
In this very room.
One of the aspects which you talked about was the implications for free will having to do with this discussion. And what I wanted to ask you is that there seem to be notions of desert and retribution. Retribution especially, which the Supreme Court said was the main tenet of our justice system, which seem to be very involved with notions of free will. So taking into account free will and how it plays into desert and retribution, using the argument where you don't have a notion of a soul and just sort of being mechanical, is there a relevant distinction to be made between the desert that a human being has as opposed to the desert that a computer deserves when it does something well? And do you think that these are important things to take into consideration?
Yeah, I think they are, and I have a chapter on that very question, based in part on work of Dan Dennett in his book Elbow Room, which he's going to expand in a forthcoming book called I think Freedom Evolves. The argument is that I don't claim to have solved the problem of free will. My argument is you don't need to have solved the problem of free will. You just have to ask why we want free will. What kind of free will do we really care about? That's why the subtitle of Dennett's Elbow Room was The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting. The reason we want free will is not that we think it's important that people can do whatever they want whenever they want. That would actually be a bad thing, not a good thing. And an example from Dennett is every time you drive along the road, you are counting on the following deterministic belief in human behavior, that the drivers on the other side of the road are not going to immediately swerve into your lane, killing both of you, because they have the free will to do that. You really want, in some cases, human behavior to be 100% predictable. What you want free will for is that among the things that make behavior predictable are anticipation of consequences, of blame and credit, of reward and punishment. So by holding someone responsible, saying, if you do the following act, we will think you're a boorish cad and ostracize you, or we'll put you in jail, or we'll fine you, that will have a predictable, indeed a deterministic effect on behavior. Namely, caddish, boorish behavior will decrease in frequency if it has consequences. If people really had free will, they could free will in the sense of doing whatever you want whenever you want. They could say, well, I don't care what you think about me, and I don't care if I spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm going to murder or rape or steal or assault nonetheless because I have the freedom to do so. So the kind of free will we want is really not complete unpredictability, but almost the opposite. We want behavior to respond to certain contingencies, such as the ones that we try to implement in the criminal justice system. And indeed, a lot of the exceptions that we make in the criminal justice system, like the insanity defense or excluding children from criminal penalties, I think are really grounded on the idea that the principle of trying to deter bad behavior without causing unnecessary suffering, that is pure spite, pure punitiveness for its own sake, should discriminate among people for whom criminal sanctions will be an effective deterrent, namely people of sound mind, and people where punishing them will not deter similar people like them in the future, such as children and the truly insane. And so that's, I think, the kind of analysis of what you want free will to do that I think gets us out of this conundrum.
Thank you.
Right. Yes?
In that we're all relieved that nobody brought noisemakers tonight. My question is, what's your sense of the percent of social scientists in the academic community in the U.S. that still subscribe wholeheartedly to the blank slate or its equivalents? And a sort of quick follow-up to that would be, and are you going to continue your mission here to help move people away from that?
Well, I guess I would know percentages, and social science is a big category, and I consider myself a kind of social scientist insofar as psychology is commonly thought to be a social science. I wouldn't know percentages because social science is fractionated into different schools. There are sort of quantitative number crunching. I think that I probably shouldn't offer a percentage. I think there are schools of social science. I think probably a very large percentage of cultural anthropologists would subscribe to the blank slate, a smaller number of psychologists and sociologists. But I think they're too fractionated to generalize across the whole discipline.
So we aren't really, you don't think that we're sort of under that misconception as we proceed in the social sciences today?
Well, I think there's some schools. So, for example, postmodernism in the humanities certainly believes in a kind of blank slate psychology, in that reality is socially constructed as opposed to being a product of human faculty of cognition and perception. And it's often assumed in postmodernist anthropology and literary criticism that there's no enduring human nature. Certainly in Marxist sociology and Marxist economics, there's also a fervent belief that it's meaningless to talk about an enduring human nature. So I think you'd have to subdivide it into different schools of thought.
Yeah. You did get a pretty critical review in the New York Times book review from a fellow there.
From a historian.
Kind of confirmed the antagonism that's still out there.
Yes. Yes.
So just a simple question. The quote by Madison, didn't that show more of an understanding of human nature in designing a government rather than some type of overdoing social engineering? And if not, what suggestions would you make to improve a Republican government, or what alternative to a Republican government would you suggest?
Oh, no, I didn't make myself clear. I cited Madison as an acknowledgement of human nature and as a good thing, not as social engineering and a bad thing. So Madison, I'm claiming Madison on my side.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Sorry, I didn't make that.
I feel much better now.
Okay, I'm sorry for not making that clear. Yeah. Yes.
A friend of mine has a son who was described at a very young age by a clinical psychologist as utterly lacking in empathy, and you used the term tonight. Is there such a thing? If there is it possible to be utterly lacking in it? And how would we describe it in terms of the brain? Thank you.
There is a syndrome, sometimes alternatively called antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy, or psychopathy, which does seem to be, to a first approximation, be a lack of empathy. And these are people estimated at somewhere would say about 3% of the male population that engages in things like raping a succession of women, bilking elderly people out of their life savings, shooting convenience store